Okay, so we've done what terms of trade is. We've done what are the things that impact changes to the terms of trade, and all it is the price of exports and the price of imports. Okay, it's just those two things. The meaning and the measurement is essentially the formula here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, okay, assuming the terms of trade changes, doesn't matter what has caused it, whether if it's gone up or down, what is the effect on a certain number of things? Okay, so the first one in the study design is when the terms of trade changes, what is the effect on the current account balance? Now let's remind ourselves what this one is. This is the seesaw, remember? And the current account is where we record all international transactions with no future financial obligation. So your key idea here on how you're going to answer this question is all about credits and debits. All right, so we're going to start with exports. Okay, so on the left-hand side here, we're just doing exports. So if there's an increase in export prices, doesn't matter how, yep, when we're doing the effects of, yeah, those arrows out of the current, the terms of trade, all you've got to say here is, okay, well, if export prices increase, how do I get to a change to the current account balance? So, right, if we're exporting coal, and the price of that coal has increased, well, there's more money coming into the country. And so that results in more credits on goods and services. And when there's more credits, the current account deficit gets smaller. That seesaw that we have, yeah, with the current account over on this side, down below the zero line, if more credits come in, then that's going to tip the seesaw closer to surplus, and the gap for the current account deficit but to the 0 point will get smaller. Therefore, it will reduce the CAD. What happens if there is a decrease in export prices? Well, it's just the opposite. Okay, so if we're selling coal and the price we get for that coal falls, well, there's going to be less money coming into Australia now. Okay, so it's less credits on goods and services. Therefore, it's going to increase the CAD. Yeah, that seesaw where the current account here is going to go further into deficit. So what does it mean for imports now? Okay, so this is coming into the country. What happens if there is a decrease in import prices? You'll see if what we're getting for, what we're paying for imports, if that becomes cheaper, well, there's less money leaving the country then. So what do we import? We import a lot of electronics, let's say cars. Let's say the price of cars significantly falls. Well, there's going to be less money that we now need to send overseas in order to buy those cars. And if there's less debits on the goods and services, then the CAD will fall. And then finally, if there's an increase in import prices, okay, so now we're having to pay more for those cars. Well, that means there's going to be more debits on goods and services, which is more money leaving the country. And if there's more money leaving the country on the current account, that's going to result in a bigger current account deficit. So this key idea of credits and debits is really, really important, guys. More credits will actually reduce the CAD, whereas more debits will actually increase the CAD. If you're unsure about the credits and debits, then you have to go back to the current account modules because you just can't do this stuff unless you fully understand it. Moving on, we're on to the goals now. The good news about the goals, guys, is the key idea here is exactly the same as you guys have been doing for the last few months. Okay, so the key idea with the goal of low inflation is you need to get to demand or cost inflation. So here we go. We're going to do the same kind of layout. So if our export prices increase, so the price for coal goes up, well, the producers who sell coal are going to require more resources in order to supply that. So we've got more demand inflation. Okay. Also, as incomes rises, yeah, because we're selling our coal overseas, incomes are going up. For those who sell the coal, they're then going to spend that extra money in the economy. and therefore we're going to get demand inflation. If there's a decrease in export prices, it's just the opposite. Yeah, so if the producers of coal and all of our other exports are getting less money for those exports, well, then their incomes are going to fall. They're going to spend less money in the economy, and therefore demand inflation will fall. On the other side, now this is all about imports. So let's keep going with our car example, yeah? So if we're importing and those cars become cheaper, actually, I'll use a different example because we need to use intermediary goods here. Let's use oil, okay? Because we import a lot of oil as a country. So if the price for oil falls, well, that's going to lower the cost of production for Australian producers, and therefore they're going to pass on those lower costs in the form of lower prices. So we're going to have lower cost inflation. When import prices go up, it's going to be exactly the opposite. Okay, so when the price of oil, for example, goes up, well, all our businesses who use oil and other items in the intermediary goods are going to have to pass on those increased costs in the form of higher prices. So we're going to have more cost inflation. So your key idea here is demand or cost inflation. Goal of strong and sustainable economic growth. It's the same key idea. We've got to get to ADAS and then to GDP or levels of production. So let's go. Exports. If there is an increase in export prices, that's going to cause an increased income effect. This is exactly the same as what we had with the inflation one. When we have increased incomes, businesses, and the owners of those businesses are going to spend more in the economy. Therefore, aggregate demand will rise, GDP will rise, production will rise. The decrease in export is just exactly the opposite. So those producers who are seeing the lower prices for their exports, they've got less money to spend, and so therefore C goes down, I goes down, aggregate demand falls, and then producers lower their level of production to meet that lower level of demand. This process should be really familiar to you guys by now. And now let's go on the import side. So if there's a decrease in import prices, this is going to sound familiar. There is a lower price for intermediary goods. So we used oil as our example here. Okay, so if the price of oil falls, that's going to make a lower price for intermediary goods, lower cost of production, and as aggregate supply increases, GDP increases. And it's just the opposite when import prices increase. So when there's a higher price for intermediary goods, there's a higher cost of production and aggregate supply will decrease, GDP will fall. You'll see a pattern that we've got here going on, guys. So on the export side, we're looking at demand side effects. And on the import side, we're looking at supply side effects. You'll thank me, well, hopefully now you'll start to thank me why we went so heavy into these links in the chain kind of process. Goal for full employment. Remember what we always said about when we're linking to the goal for full employment. We link to GDP and then we get to derived demand for labour. So the one from here is derived demand for labour. Okay, that's the key idea here. Durdem lab. Here we go. Exports, increased export prices. Well, producers will have increased incomes. They're going to spend that extra money in the economy. There's an increased derived demand for labour. If there is a decrease in export prices, if our exporters are getting less money for the goods and services that they're selling, then there is going to be decreased incomes, decreased aggregate demand in GDP, and decreased derived demand for labour. I want you to pause the video now and you tell me what's got to happen on the import side of the economy in order to change the goal for full employment. What's going to happen when import prices increase and what's going to happen when import prices decrease? Pause the video. You might have to scribble some stuff on a piece of paper, but give it a go. All right, here we go. When we have a decrease in import prices, that results in a lower price for intermediary goods. Yeah, the oil was our example that we used. Lower cost of production, aggregate supply, GDP, boom, increase in the derived demand for labour. They're going to need more workers as GDP rises, as production rises. We're going to need more workers to make that stuff. And the opposite is the case with import. Okay, if there's an increase to cost of production due to higher import prices, GDP will fall and a decreased derived demand for labour. And then our final one is living standards. We're nearly there, hooray! And your key idea always with living standards is the change to access to goods and services. So with exports, when there's an increase in export prices, well, there's increased money in the economy, full stop. Now, whether you and I have received that extra money is not the point. Yeah, when there's more money in the economy, the money usually circulates within that particular economy, and as a result, the average access to goods and services has increased. So we can say an increase in export prices increases access to goods and services. What do you think happens when export prices fall? I'm hoping you said there is decreased incomes and therefore decreased access to goods and services. All right, this one's a little bit different on this side, so we're just going to go generally as consumers. Yeah, so I'm going to stay on the consumer side here because I think it's easier. When import prices fall, you can buy more stuff. Yeah, so if something was $1 and now it's 50 cents, you can buy twice as much stuff. And so there's an increased access to goods and services. And the opposite is true when import prices rise. All right, just to recap here, guys, there are really three key ideas we're looking through here. So what is terms of trade, okay? And that is the meaning and measurement parts of the study design. The other one is what are the factors that influence a change to the terms of trade? And you've really just got to get that down to the price of imports and the price of exports. There's no specific things or factors from the study design you need to remember here, all right? But you just need to get to one of these, and then an example would probably be helpful. And then finally, we're looking at the things that actually, when the terms of trade changes, what is the effect on these 5 things? So really, really long videos, guys. It's a pretty complex topic. So please feel free to go over these videos again. And as always, reach out for any questions. And thanks for your attention. See you next time.